Everyone, it's Mark Wuellner, the Executive Director of the Indiana Bond Bank, welcoming you back to another episode of the Indiana Bond Bank Bondcast. We are so excited today to have with us Jerry Logan and Graham Honaker, the co-authors of the Cinderella Strategy, the game plan behind Butler University's rise to prominence. You may be asking why our local unit of government podcast has two authors of a book about Butler University on, but I think Jerry and Graham are going to share with us, what our audience really cares about is, how as an organization, an entity, a local unit of government, a state agency can really look to employ principles of leadership, leverage opportunities that come our way, using the Butler story kind of as a guide. I think many of us know here in Indiana that, in 2010, the Butler University men's basketball team really came to national prominence with a stunning run to the Final Four, that championship game against Duke. I was there. It was a fantastic game to watch. And in 2011, we did it again, and I got to watch that Final Four, that final game in Hinkle Fieldhouse. Unfortunately, didn't get the result we wanted either time, but still, back-to-back runs, we became America's team, America's favorite underdog, and really gave the university back home in Indianapolis this opportunity to really do something unprecedented. And I think Graham and Jerry hopefully will talk to us about that a little bit. What goes into these opportunities and how to leverage them. And again, how folks like us in the public sector can do the same. And so, Jerry, Graham, welcome to the Indiana Bond Bank Bondcast.
Thank you for having us. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Graham, you're affiliated with Butler. You can maybe tell us a little bit about your role. Jerry, you're not. I'd love maybe to start. How'd you guys get connected? What was the inspiration for the book?
Yeah, Mark, thank you again. So I've been at Butler now for 9 years. I'm on the fundraising side, executive director of principal gifts. The genesis of the book, every year I've been here, I was noticing transformational change at the university. Physical growth with the facilities and campus changing, but really an identity growth, moving to the Big East Conference, of applications doubling, again, the campus being transformed, moving to the Big East Conference, and I said, this could be a story here, beyond the walls of Butler. And I started writing, and then got together with Jerry, and I'll let him speak about his connection here, which is rather recent.
Yeah, I came into Butler very cold. I was doing my doctoral studies at Boston College and decided I wanted to do a case study, and further decided that Butler was the place I wanted to study. So I was cold calling, cold emailing my way in, and started interviewing people there. And along the way, bumped into Graham. And we just hit it off, stayed in touch. And at the start of the pandemic, he called and said, "Hey, maybe we should do something with all this writing we've done." And that was kind of the start, the seed of the book.
Wow. So in the book, as we've talked, you talked about how Butler kind of, quote, won the attention lottery, back over those 2 years to the tune of some significant earned media. Tell us a little bit about that. And I think maybe for this audience, people here you won the lottery. A lot of us would sit back, right? Sit on the beach and put our feet up. What did Butler do, or what should we be thinking about? You win that lottery. So what? What happens next?
Well, again, the earned media revenue was $1.2 billion with a B.
Wow.
In media attention. And you're right. You can just sit back and say, we hit it big. We're going to relax. We're going to enjoy this. Really proud of Butler in that we got very aggressive. Jim Danko came over from Villanova, where he was dean, came in right after that second Final Four and said, we either need to go big or go home, and quickly went about, how do we strategically leverage this in terms of marketing, telling the story, using that front porch effect to showcase all the great things that were going on at Butler, to leverage that move into the Big East. You have a very narrow window of time where you can take advantage of this. And I'm very proud that he did that, and others on campus. And fortunately, we're still seeing that halo effect, remnants of it 10 years later. Jerry, you can add to that.
Yeah, I would add, I'm once a history major, always a history major. So my first inclination sometimes to look backward. And one thing Butler got right was all the years before they got all that attention, they built a place and a culture that you could really be proud of. And so when they got swamped with attention, and it wasn't a thing you could necessarily get out in front of, and people were talking and telling stories. They were all really good stories about the place and its people and its students. The most prominent one being that because the Final Four in 2010 happened to be in Indianapolis, Butler players went to class the morning of the national championship game. And the value of that type of story being sent forward about your organization and emblematic of it, they're still reaping the rewards from that kind of attention. But that was because they built a place where that was valued well before the Final Fours ever came to town.
Yeah, so you're talking about things that happened kind of before. You're kind of think about all of us priming ourselves for that moment where hopefully opportunity hits. Can you talk about some of those things that Butler did? I think you said even going back to 1989. One of the things in the book I think Jerry you mentioned is they spent out of their rainy day fund to kind of prepare themselves for some pivotal moments, or spending out of their endowment, which I guess for folks listening to this, it's probably the equivalent of spending out of your rainy day. I mean, touching money that typically folks would tell you not to touch. And I'm curious, like that's a risk. And how did Butler kind of get their arms around that? And when did they know to pivot away from, okay, we've done that and now we need to take a more conservative approach?
I think you can kind of trace the leadership transitions, how over the long haul, they've kind of oscillated back and forth between a risk taker like Jeffrey Bannister in 1989, and then Bobby Fong was a stabilizing presence, kind of solidify some of those gains, pull back on some of those risks over the next decade. And then now, as Graham referenced, Jim Danko is another innovative risk taker, and the base after President Fong is firm, and they're able to kind of leap forward again. So when I look at this story, I kind of think one lens to view it through is just this pendulum swinging back and forth between leaders playing to their strengths, whether they're risk takers or stabilizers. Not that that's binary, but that's kind of been the tale at Butler. And another thing, worth saying, when President Bannister came in and took all those risks, they looked around in their backyard and they said, what do we have? So where do the risks make sense? And can we spread them across the community? So one English professor, Dr. Susan Neville, that we talked to, basically said, yeah, I knew men's basketball was getting attention, but we got to launch a visiting writers series. And that was really important for us. And so I didn't think it was anything other than par for the course for it to be kind of a risk-taking, innovative era. And so spreading them across the organization was really important too back then.
Nice. So I think one lesson I hear you saying, Jerry, is look in your own backyard, whether it's a city, look at an asset maybe that you've got that's underutilized, could need a little TLC, like I'm sure, if I remember, Hinkle at the time was kind of a little down to the mouth, probably could have used a little upgrade. And I'm sure for communities out there, or even schools listening, look at the assets that you've got, and maybe I hear you saying, invest those risks in things that are close at hand. We are talking with Graham Honaker and Jerry Logan, the co-authors of The Cinderella Strategy, the game plan behind Butler University's rise to prominence. Graham, I was wondering, the Butler Way, you work at Butler, I went to Butler. You hear a lot about the Butler Way. I think for a lot of us in organizations, our mission, our vision, our strategic plan just ends up as a doorstop, right? Or it's on a shelf, it gathers dust. But somehow Butler has managed to keep the Butler Way seemingly as a very vibrant core piece of the culture without being kind of kitschy. Is there a way to do that? I mean, for organizations who spend all this time to create one and then watch those just sit on the shelf?
You've got to live it out. You've got to live it out every day. I think Jerry's an example where he came to campus, I don't know, overly skeptical, but there might have been a thought of, is this real? Is the Butler Way real? And he came away believing it was real, like so many people have. So many parents we talked to who had heard about it, and then they come to campus and see the experience their son or daughter is having. And, there's so many examples in the 10 years after. We talked about the students going to class, the day of the title game, the integrity, the culture. But, one of my favorite stories, too, in the book is, Brad Stevens was having so much success. And after the 2 Final Fours, every school in America, UCLA and NC State and Illinois, were all coming after him. And, our athletic director and president came together and said, we need to re-up his contract. And they asked him what he wanted. And his response was basically he wanted more money for his assistants. So selfless, team above self. But, again, it's lived out every day. There's a joke at Butler where everyone holds the door for someone coming, and that they may hold it for like 2 minutes waiting for you to come across campus. So we're not perfect, but that culture is really important. And I mentioned there was some worry that moving to the Big East and increased expectations for fundraising and changes in the campus would change who we are. I think it's that culture, Mark, that's been the glue that has helped Butler maintain its identity in the process.
Tell us a little more about that, because change, you've hit on a great spot. I think everybody, we can sit here and theoretically say change is great, we all want to change and be better. Then you get to that rubber meets the road, and there might be particular groups of people in your organization, folks on your team, who's like, oh, that means I can't do the thing I've been doing the way I've been doing it. Even as simple as we're not going to use this Excel template and we're going to move over to this new system. Change is painful. How has Butler managed some significant changes? You said moving from kind of the quaint little unknown school in the backyard of Indianapolis to more prominence, the Big East, more expectations, building on campus. What lessons could you apply with that change management?
I think first of all, there's got to be really strong communication from the top. Change brings about fear. And so that leader needs to provide assurances while also being honest that we are going to change. Yet you've got to back it up with your actions in terms of saying we're going to change, but we're going to keep the foundation, the roots of who we are. Examples at Butler being, Hinkle Fieldhouse, put $45 million in, but we didn't change the integrity. We put a lot of thought into, we know this place has history, we know it has meaning. We're going to put some new bells and whistles in, but we are not going to change. Even the campus architecture, right? New buildings still have that Indiana limestone. And, that's important. The enrollment, we have had a huge increase in applications, but we put a hard line on, we're not going to go beyond 5,000 because, that would totally change who we are. So communication, but what you do, your actions to back up what you're saying is very important.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Then finally, I'd add one more thing
Please.
Is to project how this change is going to positively impact the organization. So the move to the Big East, right? The increased revenue we had coming in for men's basketball and attention wouldn't have been really positively reflected on if we had said that's just going to benefit men's basketball. No, this is going to bring positive change to the entire university. So the renovation to Hinkle actually impacted every men's and women's sport. The move to the Big East has helped applications increase. It's actually increased our demographic of higher GPAs and SATs. The fundraising has allowed us to build, new facilities. So how do you convey that change is going to be positive and have a positive impact on the entire organization?
That's fantastic. I think hopefully a lot of folks listening, the revenue, especially in the higher ed, the public sector, is not the end. It's usually, the means to accomplishing a bigger mission, as Graham said, continuing really that core student experience at the underlying everything at Butler and continuing to make the university a place for that. One of the neat things about the book, which again is coming out here very shortly, and we'll be sure to have a chance to talk about where you can find the book here in a second. But one of the neat things is it lays out kind of principles of leadership, strategy principles that folks can think about that Jerry and Graham learned from their research on Butler and all the numerous interviews and time on campus. And so just throw it open. Is there a particular principle you'd like to share with folks that you think would be of insight?
Yeah, the one for me, Mark, that really stood out, it might be because I wanted to see this. I'm by nature a more patient, deliberate person. And it seems that in so many business settings, my patience doesn't seem like it has a place. It feels like that's a realm of impatience and quick decisions. And knee-jerk on-the-spot reactions. And there's a lot of evidence that, in certain circumstances, we're good at making snap decisions and following our instincts. And I don't want to deny those, but Butler's story is one of patience. And when we wrote the book, we felt we had to take this over a 30-year stretch to really tell the full story. And you could wind it back even further if you wanted to, into organizations that have that type of history. So I think one of the standout features of their story is patience. Their patience when they hire people and give them the room to do their job, give them the time to do their job, even in results-oriented areas like sports, where there's a win-loss column and everybody sees it and everybody knows how you're doing at all times. They've hired for culture and then rewarded with patience. And I think it's a wonderful way to reward people, apart from, fiscal monetary rewards, is to give patience. And so that kind of gave me hope to say there's an organization here that's running a good deal on patience, and they can succeed doing that by playing a longer game than we often see.
You say rewarding with patience, Jerry. Tell me more about that. So it's if you're you fouled up at the office, you're having a bad day or something. Like, what do you mean, or what has Butler done with rewarding with patience?
Yeah, absolutely stole that phrase from Butler's athletic director, Barry Collier. And I just try to pass it off as my own, but you caught me. He spoke about rewarding with patience when he was talking about the basketball coaches and saying, we hire and we know we've got the right fit when we hire them, then we want to give them time to get their feet planted, to do well here. With a sport like men's basketball, but really you can apply this to any organization where there's high turnover. You need time to wrap your mind around personnel, to adjust with people making their own transitions in and out. So to evaluate someone after a year based on a simple metric like wins and losses is a disservice to them, but also to your hiring decision. You haven't had a chance to see what they can really do. So that's why he spoke of if you're fitting us culturally, if our students are going to class, our student athletes are in class, they're doing the things that really matter to us, and you fit culturally, the reward is patience in terms of these other metrics. We're going to give you time to figure out how to, in this case, win basketball games, but whatever it might be, we're going to give you time to figure out how to work that budget because we know you fit here. The right person's on the bus, and we just got to find what seat you fit in and how you like to operate there.
I love it. Graham, is there a particular principle that you want to touch on that, in the book is one of your favorites?
Yeah, I would say collective acceptance of change. Butler's gone through so much change. I compare us to the family that won the Powerball. Our lives have changed overnight. Moving to this new galaxy, the Big East, again, of so many increased expectations. That's great. That's wonderful. But unless there's a collective, particularly even Butler, a small school, we have 1,000 employees, we have 4,600 students. Unless you're going to embrace that, not everybody is, but unless you get a majority buy-in, it's going to be a difficult road ahead, no matter what good possibilities may lie ahead. So again, talked about communication from the top, talked about, again, forecasting how this is going to be a positive move. And again, you've got to prove yourself in the process. You've got to prove that the decisions you're making are consistent with your message. But that's been a big factor in Butler's success and moving forward is collective acceptance of change, but that attitude of, hey, my workload may be increased. As a fundraiser, my metrics are going to go way up. Admissions, our counselors are going to have to travel even farther and wider with the national attention we're getting to embrace that and say, I'm ready. I want this. I want Butler to be better, and I'm going to accept this change.
And you didn't, what I love, you didn't even use the word trust, but I hear a lot of that. Like the trust has to be there from, like you said, the leadership needs to not only say the right things, but do the right things. And hopefully, right, then that circle of trust from the folks that they're leading, whether it's faculty, as I think you've mentioned, or the students, that, okay, when they say we're going to renovate Hinkle and not, make it, New Age Art Deco or something like that, right? And it's going to still have that feel. Okay, that's an easy win. We can breathe deep, right? And hopefully the next on that journey of change. I don't know if that's how big a part of trust is that, or did you see at Butler?
That's a big part of it. I will say too, with our president, is a non-traditional president. He did not come up the traditional ranks of faculty member, tenure, got PhD. He came from the business world, and Jerry would tell you through his interviews there was some skepticism that went on there, and then I think in the course of meeting the faculty, addressing them, sharing his vision, there was trust that was built. Took a little bit of time, but he really built that trust. And trust is essential, again, when you're making a change this big. But I would say too, change, what's the old saying? The only change in life is consistent change.
Right.
We've all undergone tremendous change through the pandemic. And I think you've got to build that muscle of adapting to change, no matter what organization you're a part of. And I think, gosh, I can't think of another university that perhaps built that muscle over the last decade because of all the changes. And I think that's part of why we adapted really well in the pandemic and moved online and made a number of changes where our faculty said, yep, let's go at it.
That's fantastic. I think for our audience, I want to hit is Graham mentioned President Danko being an outsider, not coming up through traditional ranks. And I think a lot of us in government, find ourselves in those roles. There's a lot of turnover, whether seats come up every 2 years or 4 years, they're elected. Many of us in the public sector, you may have another day job and you're also the clerk treasurer, right? Or you're doing something else. And often that, some of those outreaches of, those initial outreaches of trust that, hey, I value this institution, whatever role I'm in, and I'm going to continue to honor it in the best way that I can. I'm going to bring my own vision. I'm going to bring my own way, my thoughts, and where I want to take this entity, this town, city, school, in my case, state agency. But I can speak to that, not having come from traditional public finance and being asked by the treasurer to lead this organization differently. You do have to come in and honor those folks and your team who have been there the whole time and have been on the journey, and that you're not here to discard. You're here to continue to push and move, and that the change doesn't have to be painful. It can be for the benefit, and should be for the benefit of the organization and those you're looking to serve. And so I think that I want to pull that teaching point out. Just there's a lot of us in local government, we weren't born with the mayor's hat on, right? Like you have to kind of earn that change and trust.
And Mark, that's analogous to the basketball side. We have a little section on Gonzaga in the book, who I think is a close parallel to Butler in terms of leveraging basketball for the greater good of the university. But they've had one coach for 25 years. We've had 6 of them. And to your point, when someone new comes in, as you may have a newly elected official, you've got to build that mutual trust, and you've got to trust that the person coming in does respect those traditions. And Butler, you'll note, rightly or wrongly, is always hired from within. A former player, an assistant coach, but a big foundation of that continuity and success is that those people understood who Butler was and is as an organization, that we're going to adhere to the Butler way, and we're not going to completely radically change how things are done here.
Yeah, I love that. Jerry, I want to go a little off the grid here. As a history guy, I'll throw a counterfactual to you. Let's say a couple of those layups in 2010, 2011 missed, and Butler had good tournament runs but didn't hit the Final Four, didn't make it those championship games. I mean, so having looked at the university and the culture and the Butler way, where do you think the university would be today in 2021? Had it not had kind of that lightning in a bottle that you guys have talked about?
Yeah, I'll answer that in just a sec. Let me also throw a counterfactual at you. I was one time riding in a van with some Butler fans going down to Milan, Indiana. And I said, hey, do you think you're better off that Gordon Hayward's half-court heave missed you retain your underdog status. You're still beloved. You're still this darling. And they were very kind about it, but the answer was no. You're an idiot for even bringing that up. So when you asked your question, I heard that in my head. I'll be careful with this one. But yeah, in talking to people at Butler, I think the consensus that emerged for me is we were moving in this direction, and the Final Fours were a catalyst. And so I can't imagine us moving in this direction with this speed without them. So I do think what it did was shorten the timeline or speed up the timeline or whatever the right verb for the timeline is, and enabled Butler to kind of move in the directions with more momentum, with more confidence. I think that's a big thing you can see is just the risk, the confidence in taking some risks and being bold and making some big asks that sprung from this feeling, this euphoria that kind of took over the place and said, we belong on the big stage and we can hold up to the scrutiny and the attention. The confidence that came from that, I think, is maybe one of those pieces that takes longer to develop. And so I do think the university would have had some wins in other areas that might have inspired in the same way over time, because I think they were on the right course. But I'm not sure that it would happen so quickly. And now you hit the pandemic. And as Graham is fond of saying, I can't imagine what we'd be doing now without this kind of rapid move that we've made over the past decade. So the time has shaken up nicely for the university in that sense.
I love that. So I hear you saying this didn't create a new strategy or kind of send them off down a different rabbit hole. It really took the strategy they had, and I think you used the word catalyst, Jerry. They used it as, a foot on the gas moment of, okay, this is where we've kind of wanted to go, that daily incremental chip away at the plan, but this really allowed them to take it into light speed is what I'm hearing you say. So you think we'd still be on this course as Butler, just maybe not quite at the rate that we've been?
I do, yeah. And I think, you can look at the Big East. That's pretty clear. That probably doesn't happen without the Final Four runs. And remove it probably. Just this doesn't happen without the Final Four runs. I think, and this is to really lean into your counterfactual, I think Butler still finds a way to make a mark on the East Coast in some of those bigger markets over time. I think they find a way because they had the right people on the ground in Indianapolis. But the Big East just makes it so much easier and more natural for them to do that. So that's exactly it. It just catalyzed it.
That's fantastic. You guys have been so generous with your time today. I've really appreciated it. I know our listeners will appreciate something a little bit different and learning leadership tips, I think, from, again, an institution that's right here in our own backyard. Would love, Graham and Jerry, can you share where they can find the book, how to promote the book, where they can connect with you guys on social media? Just share all that with us, please.
Yes, so the book is available on a couple of different places. Our publisher's website is www.pediment.com. That's PEDIMENT. So pediment.com. It's also on the Barnes & Noble's website. And then Amazon right now, you can add it to your wish list. I believe, Jerry, probably by the end of March, early April, they'll be selling it as well. We do have a Twitter account, the Cinderella Strategy. We've got a Facebook account, the Cinderella Strategy. You just Google those in. And finally, I'd say we're going to be donating some of the proceeds to Project 44, which the Indiana state government has also, I think they made it their charity of choice a couple of years ago. So we'll be donating some proceeds there that memorializes Andrew Smith, who was a stalwart on those Final Four teams and sadly contracted leukemia and passed away 5 years ago. Thank you.
That really is, and just emblematic of the Butler Way to continue to pass some of that on in Andrew's memory. So that is amazing. Finally, what audience, gentlemen, who should be reading this book? Obviously, Butler alums have a natural tie. Who else do you hope picks this book up and takes something from it?
Well, I think it's applicable to about any organization. Certainly higher ed, athletic departments, but we believe that the 12 principles embedded in the book can be applied just about anywhere. So one of my motivations, I have so many books on my shelf about how Marriott and Starbucks and Southwest Airlines do things. Where can you find a book where a university, has done some things that can apply to the private sector? There are probably some out there. I don't know of that many. And so we feel that organizations that are looking to further develop their culture, leadership, and perhaps another segment would be underdogs in business and life who still believe that David can beat Goliath. This is a great story about how and believing in yourself. So, Jerry, I don't know if you have any other audiences I'm missing.
Yeah, I think that last one is a great one. I always like to think of the story in terms of what do you do when, like you said at the very beginning, Mark, what do you do when you won the attention lottery? So I just think of the age of social media, so many organizations are competing for people's attention and competing for positive news cycles and things like that. And not necessarily thinking about, well, what do we do if we get it? So Butler is really, I think, a cool story of a place that managed that success and attention well. And that really is an underdog story. How do you deal well with success? Not many organizations have figured out how to do that. So kudos to Butler. And if you're interested, this is I hope a good book for you to get an inside peek at how they've done that.
That is fantastic. Thank you. We all should have a lot of time to read here as we still hopefully transition very soon out of COVID-19, but perfect. Yeah, perfect gift. And thank you again, Jerry, Graham, for being with us here on the Indiana Bond Bank Bondcast. For those watching or listening, I guess there's always both options here. So click subscribe, whichever way you choose to partake of the podcast. And until next time, this is Mark Wuellner, Director of the Indiana Bond Bank, and here for the whole team of the Bond Bank, say thank you for watching and listening. Take care, and we'll talk soon.